This is Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast, with your hosts, Brandon Spinner and Michael Burns.
Welcome back to Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Spinner, alongside one of my good buddies, Michael Burns. As you just heard, Michael Burns is here. Mikey, how you doing today on this fine Monday?
I'm doing pretty good. I think I'm on like day one of a cold coming on. Maybe it was a holiday long weekend. It was nice weather here for us in Alabama.
Yeah, happy Father's Day.
Yes, thank you. You too.
Thank you.
I played baseball on Father's Day. It was a good time.
What was your line on the day? 1 for 3 with 2 strikeouts.
1 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. Yes.
Oh boy.
I played 7 innings of second base then with 1 ball hit to me. A fly ball.
That's it. Fly ball. Not even a ground ball.
No, not even a ground ball.
Well, if you had a ground ball, you'd probably be saying, "I wish I had a cup. I wish I had a cup. I wish I had a cup."
No, I knew we had a smaller amount of people show up Sunday, and so I knew that I had a chance of playing on the field. So I wore a cup. On days I know I'm going to be pitching, I don't wear one.
What's that?
On days that I know I'm going to be pitching, I don't wear a cup.
Smart. Cup check. He's a little more loosey-goosey on the mound, though, right?
Yeah, when those PFPs start happening, though, for those PFPs, the cup is sometimes wanted.
And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, go just search Athletic Cup, and you'll know where we're talking and what we're talking.
If you don't know what PFPs are.
Oh,
you went Athletic
Pitcher Fielding
Cup.
Practice. Yes, Athletic Cup as well. PFP stands for Pitcher Fielding Practice. As far as us, you've made it a minute or two into this podcast already, and if you're still with us, thanks for sticking around. This is Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. We talk bourbon, we talk baseball, where our proof is high and our heat is high as well. So high proof, high heat. And we're going to do a bourbon review tonight. Before we jump into that, jump on to YouTube. That's where you can find us if you want the video portion of this podcast. But also, we put out other video shorts and content and just some YouTube exclusive videos that you can find there. So go on over there. Find us Barrels and Barrels Pod on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. That's our handle. So at Barrels and Barrels Pod. And go follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We're on Twitter at Barrels and Barrels. And you can find our podcast wherever you stream podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. If you could do us a favor, you're listening to this on one of those, maybe on those platforms, scroll to where you have the rating portion or the reviewing portion of the podcast and give us a rating and a review, just like we're going to do this bourbon today. We'd love all of your truth and honesty. So let us know what you think about our podcast. We're right now 15 out of 15 5 stars on Apple and 10 out of 10 5 stars on Spotify. Would love to hear more about your thoughts. And speaking of thoughts, we're going to dive right into this week's whiskey review. This is a bottle from Michael Burns. We're going with Sagamore Spirits Double Oak Rye. So, Mikey, what you got for me?
Yeah. So, speaking of leaving reviews, even if you've had the bourbon that we review and you want to let us know what you think of it, we'd love to hear, especially if you used our own rating scale.
Right.
That'd be a lot of fun.
We just had Jerry, who's on vacation in Kentucky, who is a whiskey kid in his peppers from A Poor Man's Pour. They're a podcast as well. He reviewed the winter whiskey from New Riff the other day, and he sent us his thoughts on it, and he rated that a bench. Michael and I both DFA'd it, so we'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, as Michael just mentioned, whether that is a whiskey review or it's just the review of our podcast. So speaking of a whiskey review, that's what we're doing today. Michael, what you got for me?
Yeah, so this is Sagamore Spirits Rye, but it's a double oak. And I'm not a major rye guy, but I own and have destroyed this bottle.
You've not only destroyed it, that's like the one thing that you talked about me for like 2 weeks. You were like, dude, this Sagamore double rye, this is double oak. So you sent me a sample. I tried it at your house before, but it's been a while, so we're going to revisit it.
Yeah, so this is Sagamore Spirits Double Oak Rye, so that gives it a little bit. It is 96.6 proof, and they age this about 4 to 5 years in high char new American oak barrels, of course. And then they transfer them over into toasted wave stave barrels, and that's for about an additional 18 months. And that's something that some of the double oaks or toasted don't tell you. They don't tell you how long they did it, where Sagamore here is putting it on the label 18 months.
Yeah, the transparency is very admirable, and it is very helpful. So thank you, Sagamore Spirits, for that. I know most of those toasted are even less than 6 months most of the time. I think Elijah Craig toasted barrels around 6 months, and the others don't really disclose it. Like Woodford, I think Woodford, I heard on a podcast, is around 6 months as well. But Sagamore letting you know exactly at 18 months.
Yeah, I had Googled when my first daughter was born, I bought for the first time Woodford Double Oaked because I had saw somewhere that it said 9 months was how long they did it. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. 9 months in the belly, 9 months, in the additional barrel. So that's why I bought that one. So I'm seeing Brandon on the bottle says aged in new charred oak barrels, distilled in Indiana, bottled in Baltimore.
Yes.
So do you think this is MGP juice?
It is MGP. I think it's contract distilled rather than sourced.
You're going to have to explain to me the difference between those two.
So when you source it from someone, you're basically just buying their juice. Like, okay, MGP's 5 bourbon recipes are XYZ, PDQ, whatever. And you buy them from that distillate. You can also get contract distilling where you're telling them what you want distilled. So this may not be the normal MGP mash for their rye. I know the normal mash is 95.5, but this is a composition of 2 different ryes. A super high rye, which I believe is 95.5 or 99.1. And then a lower rye mash bill, which would just be at least 51% rye within that mash. And it's a combination of both. So when I'm saying it is contract distilled, Sagamore reaches out to MGP, says, hey, this is what we're looking for. We want this mash bill. This is how we want it distilled. And then we want it in these barrels. And then they send it off rather than just buying the juice that's already been distilled. Yeah. Or the distillate. So that's the difference. They do say it on their website. Knowing how long it takes to build a distillery, in 2013, we asked our friends in Indiana to distill 2 different mash bills for us. They make great whiskeys out there, and we couldn't be prouder of the product. So they bring it to Maryland, in Baltimore, as you mentioned, and that is where the distillery is, in Baltimore, right there near the harbor. A very cool place to visit. Yeah, and Maryland rye has actually got a little bit of a tradition behind it. I talked with Ginger Jess over at a whiskey fest this weekend in Illinois. She's one of the marketing reps and like the brand managers for the Midwest region of the United States. And so we talked a little bit about Sagamore. I like what they're doing out there. Fully rye, and a little bit of a different hint and a little bit different of a flavor. But yeah, you said 4 to 5 years. So it's just a blend between those 4 and 5 year whiskeys.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think MGP has been doing that since 2013, but they've been distilling since 2017 their own spirits. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more and more of their bottles turning towards their own distillate, or at least a blend of both.
Okay. Now I'll give a little description. I just noticed on the cork says 1909, which you can see there in the video.
And I think that there's a story behind. So 1909, it says each one of our products is proofed with pure limestone filtered water from our spring house, which was built in 1909, and that's why on each bottle appears a special 1909 marker, and that's coming from their website. So that's cool. 1909. There's a lot of history and years on that.
So that doesn't mean that Sagamore has been around since 1909, but that house was built in 1909.
Yeah, that limestone spring house is what they called it. I think the distillery's been around since 2013 when they revamped it. I believe there's a lot of history that there was something there in the past. To be honest, I talked to so many people this past weekend, I can't remember 100% of what Ginger Jess told me, but
But other than that, it's a pretty neat bottle. It's diamond, I would say, shaped. It comes to a point at the front. It says Sagamore in the glass on both sides. Has the 3 diamonds on both sides of that. Neat bottle and neat colors for this. It's almost holographic. Kind of
it's like
copper
a
and blue.
dark navy purple, right?
Yeah, it's a navy, and I would say this is like a copper color.
Yeah. And you put it perfectly, the holographic look to it. It's got like a little bit of a sheer or a sheen to it.
Yeah, the label looks good. I favorite color blue. I wonder why. Um, so I'm definitely drawn to the bottle.
Now,
What
there
you
was
get
a
on the,
story behind this. You were given a sample of this before you actually had the bottle itself, right?
I don't remember where I had it though. You say that, and that's exactly right. I had it somewhere, and I had to run out. I was in Nashville when I had it. I don't know if it was from my brother-in-law or if it was at Brinkman's and he didn't have any.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I had it, but I ran out to Total Wine in Brentwood and grabbed the last bottle on the shelf of this double oak. I was like, "Oh, I got it, Brandon."
Yes, you did. And then we got a sample, and now we're here, and we're going to do another review on it. So you asked me nosing it. I got dark fruit, toasted marshmallow, some chocolate on the nose, definitely some oak there, say some cherry. Very beautiful nose. This is one of my favorite noses, to be honest. Like these double oaks.
Oh yeah. The double oaks do great because that toasty, like you said, toasty
Yep.
marshmallow, the sweetness of the toast comes through very well.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a bad toasted bourbon yet,
No,
and this is a rye, and this is a rye.
100% agree. Yeah, this is a rye. It's won some awards, and it's using that low char on the 18 months in an additional barrel, and I believe it's a like different type of barrel on the inside. I think it was a wavy cut on the barrel, is what I was reading. So there's a little more surface area.
Yeah.
Yeah, toasted wave stave barrels for an additional 18 months. So that increases the surface area. And I'm assuming that that's going to be Kelvin barrels, which is who that's been experimenting with that cut and those staves. Can't 100% speak to it, but I believe Kelvin was the originator, at least the innovator on that. So that would be what I'm guessing here. But yeah, very strong toasty nose. What do you get out of all this?
Well, you mentioned it's won some awards. It has on my neck. It has a little another label wrapped around. It says 96 points from the Toasting Panel magazine, and then I can't quite read, but I'm gonna guess this is San Francisco double gold. I can't read. Wine and Spirits Wholesale of America. That can't be right. But it got double gold. It says
Double
on that
gold
little
something.
sticker label. Yeah, so yeah, on the nose, I immediately get toast. Toast right
Hmm.
away. I know now after having a couple toasted different bourbons, whiskeys, ryes, I can catch a toast. Especially, I feel like Elijah Craig toasted is one I've destroyed as well.
Hmm.
And I've done a lot of taste testing difference blind between the toasted and the regular, and I can always pick the toasted up. So
So on the nose, I think it's got more of a bourbon nose to it. But then when you go to the palate, you definitely get the rye pulling out of that, the tingling from the rye. I think it's warm right up front. I think it hits a little harder than the 96.6 that's on the bottle itself. And I think that's probably more so the rye coming through.
mm.
But boy, some chocolate toffee. I still feel more like a s'mores out of this. Very yummy pour. What do you think?
Yes, it's a unique taste. Again, I don't drink a lot of ryes, so for me, it's unique. I do get that chocolate. I get that toffee, marshmallow. It's creamy. I think
Hmm.
is the whole drink is just creamy and it's delicious. Every time I have, I forget how good it is sometimes.
It's got a creaminess to it, but there's also, I'm going to call it pop roxy, where you feel like you got little tingles on your tongue. It's not like a huge widespread tingle, but there's just like little pops and pringles and little pops and little sticks right there, here and there.
Yeah, I don't know that I get that this time though. I get that bite of the rye flavor. It definitely drinks a little bit higher than 96, but not much. I'd say like maybe, a bonded or a little 102 at the most. But part of that is that rye spice.
Hmm. Definitely. I would say that this is a good pour to give someone who's not a fan of rye, but who's a fan of bourbon as a bridge rye.
Right.
Right, you're bridging the gap.
I've had Woodford. I've had Michter's.
We've had a Michter's, yes.
Toasted rye.
Mm-hmm.
What did I say? Woodford already. Elijah Craig. Which one did you tell me that was? Oh, I haven't had.
Old Forester 1910 is a double oaked.
I don't think I have that.
You just had a double oaked from Starlight. That was a rye as well, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. It was.
So there's a lot more out there, and there's still more coming out. It's one of the more popular things to do nowadays is toast it with a finish. So Michael Burns on our Barrels and Barrels, a Bourbon and Baseball podcast rating scale. Where do you rate this whiskey?
This guy, it's an all-star for me. I would go to it.
Cue music. Hey now, you're an all-star.
It's a rye. I just put in a rye as an all-star. This is a rye that I would recommend every time. Hey, this if that's on the menu, get it.
Yeah,
it's probably not an expensive pour.
This is one that Michael has been raving and ranting about for the entire time that I've pretty much known him. He's been all about the Sagamore double oak rye, and I am going to go with an everyday player on this. I've seen it in stores. I haven't grabbed it just because I have so much right now and I had a sample, so I was like, I don't need to grab it because I've got a sample from Michael.
Have you had this? You had this before at my house, but that was it.
Yeah, at your house. And I even passed up on a sample this past weekend at the Whiskey Fest in Malloy's in Chicago, which you'll hear more about in episode 30 on our podcast. Or you probably already heard about it because this is going to be dropping off after that podcast. But yes, I'm going with Everyday Player. For those new to our podcast, we've got a baseball rating scale. Hall of Fame, top of the top, which is the best of the best. We haven't done one yet. So that's how rare and unique this is. And this is probably Bourbon Review 50, 55 or so for us between our normal podcasts and our reviews. All-Star, Michael just rated. This is probably your fourth.
Yeah, I would think so. First rye on that All-Star list.
That is the second best All-Star. Next, Everyday Player. That's my rating. That's a player that you have every day in your lineup. He's an impactful player, may not be an all-star, but someone you can rely on day in and day out. And that's one of those that's always going to have a spot on your bar, but you're not going to it every day per se, but you wouldn't mind pouring it every day if you had to. Bench is the next guy. That is a mix-up player. That's someone who comes off the bench with a big pinch hit with a home run, maybe a fill-in player here or there, or a defensive replacement, maybe even a spot starter, just like baseball. That's one of those that every once in a while you go and mix things up and go grab a pour of that. And then finally, designate for assignment. You go find another home. Do not have a spot on my bench. Don't want you on my glass.
For the flavor, yeah.
Yeah. Or if I'm going to use you, I'm using you in cocktails because I'm just trying to water you down.
Yep. Now, one thing that I like to talk about and like to ask you, what would get you to the next level? This is an everyday player for you. What would get this to an all-star for you?
I think that the finish lacks just a little bit. I think the finish, if I was looking for a little bit more flavor, it's been 2 minutes since I last had a sip, and I don't really taste much. To be honest. So if it lasted a little bit longer on a finish, there was a little bit more sweetness to the finish, this would totally be an all-star for me. But a very good pour nonetheless.
Yeah, I just burped a little bit and it tasted good. It still tasted good. I can agree there. What would get this from an all-star to Hall of Fame for me if it wasn't a rye?
That's what I figured your answer was going to be. If this had the word bourbon on the bottle, Michael would have just said Hall of Famer.
It wouldn't have that rye flavor, which is the downer for me, but this is so marshmallow for me. If it wasn't a rye, it would taste like the other one, the bourbon that I think tastes like a huge marshmallow that isn't toasted actually, and it's Old Forester single barrel strength.
Those Old Forester sibs are so good. Speaking of so good, we are a Bourbon and Baseball podcast. We just did a whiskey review, but I do want to throw in some baseball in this podcast, Michael. Trivia. We do this in our normal episodes, and I figured we could start doing them in our reviews because it's not going to add too much time. This Baltimore rye, this is a Maryland rye, so Baltimore Orioles. They last made the playoffs in 2016. They've got a chance this year. And they played the Toronto Blue Jays in the wild card round in 2016. Who was the starting pitcher for that Baltimore Orioles team? in that game.
In 2016, John Means was not there yet.
Nope.
Let's go with Kevin Gosman.
Is that your final answer?
That's my final answer.
That is incorrect. I believe Gosman and Bundy were on the team, but it was Chris Tillman.
Chris Tillman, okay.
And I believe he went 1 1/3 of an inning in that game, and they lost by a score of 5-2. I would have expected them to lose a lot bigger than 5-2 with just seeing the stat line of 1.1 innings pitched, but that's when Buck Showalter pulled him early, and I think that was also the year that they didn't use Zach Britton to win the game. Or at least
I remember that huge controversy. Yep, Zach Britton, the best pitcher in baseball that year, didn't pitch in the playoffs for his playoff team.
Hasn't really done anything since, but hey, nonetheless.
Hey,
Chris Tillman is the answer, and we just reviewed Sagamore Double Oak Rye Whiskey from Sagamore Spirits out in Baltimore, Maryland. Go check them out. Very, very much would recommend this, and as you heard from Michael, it's an all-star, just like Smash Mouth. So that has been Barrels and Barrels, the Bourbon and Baseball Podcast Whiskey Review. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. If you've made it here so far through this 20-minute podcast, thank you for that. Find out more about our page on our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram pages at Barrels, the letter N, Barrels Pod. Barrels and Barrels Pod. You can find us on Twitter, Barrels and Barrels, and email us if you have any questions. Maybe you want some B&B merch. We've got hats, we've got shirts, we've got stickers. Reach out to us, barrelsandbarrels@gmail.com. What to look out for here down the road, we've got more bourbon and whiskey reviews on the way, some interviews coming up here shortly, as well as at one point we'll do Bourbon 101. If you want some information about what makes a whiskey a bourbon, or rather than just regular whiskey or rye whiskey, I do have a short up on our Instagram page with a breakdown of that, but we'll do more of a 101 and break it down even more in depth at some point. We've been teasing that for almost a year here, so we'll finally get that done. And of course, we've got more podcasts.
All about you.
Yeah.
All about us. That's always been teased too.
Yes, we'll learn about Michael at some point here soon, and myself. So that has been another episode of Barrels and Barrels, the Bourbon Baseball Podcast. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, Google, and iHeartRadio podcasts. Please rate us and review us, just like we rated and reviewed this whiskey with our open and honest thoughts. We gave you our 100% truth and thoughts behind this. This was not a bottle that was gifted to us or given to us. So Sagamore Spirits, Double Oak Rye. Go grab some.
There we go. Yeah, I would recommend it. It's tasty even for a rye.
Yes, it is. And you heard that because Michael said it was an all-star. But Michael Burns, any last words for our friends, family, viewers, listeners?
Nope. Let us know if you want a hat.
Yeah.
Let us know if you want a shirt. Otherwise, let's go.